All right, I want you to, just for a second, to close your eyes. Try to go back in time.
Okay.
Back to 1999. Do you remember what that even felt like?
Mm.
The Y2K panic was everywhere.
Yeah.
The Matrix had just come out and, completely changed movies. You were probably listening to music on a Discman that skipped every time you moved.
It was a completely different universe, especially digitally.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you wanted to get online, you had to listen to that squeaking dial-up modem.
Yeah. You couldn't use the phone.
Not at the same time, no. But somewhere in that slow-loading, kind of pixelated world, someone decided to plant a flag. Not for news, not for shopping, but for this incredibly specific niche of American football.
It is, honestly, is a fascinating little slice of internet history. We always talk about the dot-com bubble bursting, but this is a story about something that just didn't burst. It just stayed.
Today, we are doing a deep dive into a website called Option Central. And looking at this stack of material we have, their own history pages, their archives, it feels less like a website and more like a digital time capsule we've just cracked open.
And it makes this huge claim. It claims to be the first and longest-running membership-based football coaching website.
Founded in 1999.
Yeah.
That's 25 years. In internet time, that's like the Stone Age.
It is. I mean, just think about how many websites from 2005, let alone 1999, are just gone.
Vanish.
For a site this niche, dedicated to one football strategy to survive for a quarter century, that takes a level of community buy-in that you almost never see today.
So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We're going to try and figure out how Option Central did it, how did it survive. We'll look at its history, how its resources evolved, and what this 25-year archive tells us about football itself.
And I think we're going to see two really interesting stories play out. The first is just the evolution of coaching tools. You know, how we went from reading text on a clunky monitor to streaming full-on video courses.
Right.
And the other is the tactical battle, the chess match between offense and defense that's just sort of frozen in time inside these archives.
Okay, so let's start with the origin story, because back in 1999, social media wasn't a thing. Blogging was barely a thing. So who wakes up one day and says, you know what the dial-up world needs? A digital hub for option football.
That would be Coach Mike Schuster. And looking at the founding material, he had a very, very specific vision. He didn't call it a blog or a news site. He called it a clearinghouse.
A clearinghouse. That's such a specific, almost bureaucratic word. It sounds like a bank.
It does, right? But in this context, that word is everything. A clearinghouse is a central place where things are exchanged. So it wasn't just him shouting into the void. The sources say it started as a place for articles contributed by the football coaching community.
So it was basically crowdsourcing before crowdsourcing was a word we used.
Exactly. And you have to understand the context of the option community. In football, the option offense is, well, it's often seen as a little bit cultish.
Cultish.
In a good way. It's just very distinct. It's not what you see NFL teams doing most of the time. So if you were a high school coach in 1999 running the option, you were probably feeling pretty alone. You couldn't just copy the pros on TV.
Schuster created a town square for these coaches.
A town square, but with a velvet rope. And this is the key detail. The sources make it clear it was membership-based.
Oh.
That's the real differentiator. It wasn't some free-for-all forum. By putting a price on it, he created a barrier to entry. It signaled that this was for professionals, for people serious enough about the craft to pull out a credit card, which you have to remember, people were still terrified of doing online in '99.
That's a really good point. It creates value from day one. And they've really leaned into that legacy. I was looking through their timeline, and they celebrate their anniversaries like a sports dynasty.
They absolutely do. They have these markers. There's the 10 years of Option Central message from Schuster.
Then the 20th anniversary in 2019, which covered all the development since 2009.
And most recently, the 25th in 2024.
It's just impressive. It's like finding a library that stayed open through multiple wars. The tech wars, the social media wars. Option Central just kept on publishing.
And that longevity lets us see the shift in how coaches learn, which is, I think, the next big piece of this puzzle. Because if you're trying to teach a complex football play, 1999 technology had some pretty big limits.
Yeah, you're just dealing with text, maybe a few static diagrams. X goes here, O goes there.
Exactly. And for the option, that's a huge problem. The option is all about motion. It's about timing. It's about reading body language. The quarterback has to read a defender's shoulders in a tenth of a second. You can describe that in an article, but until you see it, it's just abstract.
Which brings us to what I'm calling the DeMaio era in the archives. This looks like the moment The site really pivoted from being text-based to a full-on multimedia platform.
This was the absolute game changer. The sources talk all about the shift to video, to Chalk Talks and podcasts, and the big catalyst was a collaboration with coach Tony DeMeo.
And the site describes him as one of option football's most recognized authorities.
He's a legend in that world. And he brought more than just his name. He brought a whole system. Together, they built out the Triple Gun Virtual Playbook.
Triple gun. It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It's a very aggressive, shotgun-based version of the option. But just look at the scale of the resource they built. The notes say the collection spans 10 DVDs.
10 DVDs. Wow. I mean, it just screams mid-2000s, doesn't it? But think about the amount of footage that must be.
It's encyclopedic, and this is why video is so important. They mentioned the Play of the Day Chalk Talk videos. A Chalk Talk isn't just watching game film, it's the coach, drawing on the screen, pausing the action, explaining the why.
Ah, so you get inside the coach's head.
You do. Why did the QB step there? Why did that receiver motion across? It moves from just instruction to immersion. You're not just reading the recipe. You're in the kitchen with the chef.
But they didn't get stuck in that DVD era, right? I mean, I don't think I even own a DVD player anymore.
No, and that's key to their survival. The source material explicitly says these resources evolved into CoachTube courses, and they specifically mention the introduction to the triple gun offense.
So you could literally trace the history of media through this one football play. 1999, you print an article. 2009, you buy a DVD box set. 2024, you stream a course online.
The play itself hasn't really changed. The physics of it are the same. But the delivery system kept up with the times. That's how a niche site survives. If they'd stayed as a text-only site, they would have been a ghost town 15 years ago.
A virtual playbook. I love that term. It feels alive, interactive.
It raises the standard for coaches, too. Now there's really no excuse not to know every single detail.
Okay, so here's where the deep dive gets a little twisty for me. We've been talking all about offense running the ball, scoring points, the fun stuff.
But Option Central isn't just for the offensive guys.
No, and this was a brilliant strategic move. They realized that for every coach who runs the option, there's another coach who absolutely dreads facing it.
The source material lists resources for those who, quote, have to defend it.
Have to.
I love that phrasing. It sounds so burdened. I have to defend the option this week.
It perfectly captures the feeling of a defensive coordinator. You have to understand the option is just weird. It's an outlier. Most teams want to throw the ball now. So you spend all year building a defense to stop the pass, and then 1 week in October, you face an option team.
And everything changes.
Everything. They don't pass. They run right at you. They block your defensive linemen. Your players are confused. It is a nightmare week of preparation.
It sounds like cramming for a final exam for a class you never went to. That is the perfect analogy. So Option Central stepped in and said, we can help you. The sources list articles, Chalk Talks, full-length videos, all on defense.
And it mentions they teach you how to defend it from various defensive schemes. So it doesn't matter if you're a 4-3 team or a 3-4 team. They have a specific guide for your problem.
It makes the site a complete ecosystem. It's the idea of the weapon and the shield. To build a better shield, you have to understand the weapon. And this is the really key part. If you're an offensive coach, you need to watch those defensive videos.
Because you need to know how they're going to try and stop you.
Exactly. You need to know what the other side is thinking. If I'm running the triple gun, I want to watch the video that tells defensive coaches how to stop it. I want to see where my weaknesses are so I can fix them.
That's incredible. They're essentially arming both sides of the war.
They are. And by putting it all under one membership, they make everyone better. The offensive coaches get smarter, and the defensive coaches, well, they survive their nightmare week.
Now, I wanted to dig into what the notes call the deep archives, because we've talked about the flashy stuff, right? The triple gun, the videos. But the source material also lists a resource library with things that, well, on the surface, they sound kind of boring.
You're talking about the paperwork.
The paperwork, coaching forms, scouting report templates. To the average person, this sounds like homework. Why is this a major feature?
Because coaching is homework. We see the game on Friday night, but the job, the real work, is Monday through Thursday.
Okay, so walk me through that. Why is a scouting report template so valuable?
All right, imagine you're a high school coach. You probably teach a full day of classes, you've got 50 teenagers to manage, you have limited practice time, and you have to watch hours of film on your opponent. If you don't have a system, a way to organize all that information, you will drown.
So a template is like a life raft.
It is. A good template forces you to look for the right things. It has boxes for formation, down and distance tendency, key players. It systematizes the chaos. And the source makes a really specific point that I think is important.
What's that?
It says these forms are suitable for use in any offensive or defensive system.
I saw that. So even though it's option central, the administrative tools are universal.
Exactly. You could be running the complete opposite of the option, like the air raid offense, and you could still sign up just to get those organizational tools.
Which goes right back to that original clearinghouse mission. It's not just about the plays, it's about professionalizing the act of coaching itself.
It's about sharing best practices. Here's how a successful program organizes its week. For a young coach, that information is absolute gold.
They also mention online books and ebooks and an article library that has everything from classics from the first 10 years to modern stuff.
That word classics is doing a lot of work there, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, think about it. In almost any other technical field, say medicine or computer science, an article from 2001 is obsolete. It might even be dangerous.
Right, you don't want your surgeon using a textbook from 2001.
Not at all.
Okay.
But here, they are proudly displaying the first 10 years as a feature.
But football's different. The geometry of the field hasn't changed. It's still 100 yards long, still 11 players on each side.
So math stays the same.
The math is the same. The physics of leverage, how to block someone bigger than you, that hasn't changed since they wore leather helmets. So a classic article from 2002 on, say, blocking angles on the perimeter is probably just as true today as the day it was written.
That is such a profound difference between sports strategy and, say, technology. The tech to deliver the info changed completely, text to DVD to streaming. But the core content, the truth of the strategy, can be timeless.
Strategy just recycles. I mean, you watch the NFL today and you'll see these innovative new plays that are really just concepts from the 1970s with a new coat of paint. That's why archives like this are so valuable. When you get a membership and the notes say it's unlimited access, you're not just getting what's new, you're inheriting the institutional memory of the sport.
The collective brain of the entire option community.
Exactly. You can go back and see how a coach solved a specific problem back in 2004. And you know what? Chances are that solution still works.
So let's try to pull this all together. We have Option Central. It starts in the dial-up era in 1999. It survives the dot-com crash, the rise of social media, the massive pivot to video. It partners with experts to build these huge libraries of content. It covers offense, defense, and even the boring but essential paperwork.
It's a comprehensive ecosystem. That's the word I keep coming back to. It isn't just a store that sells football plays. It's a living organism that has adapted over and over to keep a very specific culture alive.
And for you listening, whether you care about the triple gun or not, I think there's a bigger lesson here about the internet.
I agree. We talk so much about how the internet divides us or how it destroys our attention spans, but this is a case where it did the exact opposite. It brought a very specific, kind of marginalized group of people, option coaches, together, and it gave them a home for 25 years.
If this site didn't exist, where would all that knowledge be?
It would just be gone. Those classic articles would be lost on some dead hard drive. The DeMeo DVDs would be in a box in someone's garage. Option Central became the curator. It decided this stuff was worth saving.
That's actually really cool. It makes me wonder what other centrals are out there for other niche topics. Is there like a pottery kiln central that's been running since 1998?
I guarantee you there is. And they probably have a classic article on firing temperatures that is still the absolute Bible for that community.
True. So as we wrap this deep dive up, I want to leave you with one last thought. We talked about those classic articles, the ones from the early 2000s that are still considered essential reading.
The foundational texts.
Right. We live in a world that is obsessed with new. The new phone, the new app, the new AI update. We tend to treat old as if it means broken. But here is a whole community that treasures a 25-year-old PDF about blocking schemes.
It really challenges our whole definition of progress, doesn't it?
It does. So the question is this. In your field, whatever you do, if you're a coder, a writer, a teacher, what are the things that don't change? Despite all the new tech and all the innovations, are there fundamental principles, maybe some truths, that are just immune to time?
Maybe the best way to move forward isn't always to chase the next big disruption. Maybe it's to look back at what worked 25 years ago and ask why it still works.
Sometimes the old school is the best school. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you on the next one.